What I ended up doing is I had to change my perspective, right? My perspective had to fail from me trying too hard, for lack of a better way to put it. And the skill that I implemented is less of a skill and more of a process, was to establish a process that can be a gateway to diversity rather than chase it explicitly.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lucas. I'm one of the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change.
And I'm Justin Scott Campbell. I am a DEI consultant and leadership executive coach.
This is our podcast, Catalyzing a Culture of Inclusion, where we highlight catalysts who have taken the brave step of moving into DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, leadership in large organizations.
We hope this mini-series is a space of learning, encouragement, and ultimately community and connection. If you're new to DEI and or the world of Catalyst, we hope you'll enjoy. So today we have Calvin Hosey on our on our podcast today. He's the head of operations and payment partnerships at Regpack. As a Black tech executive, he's climbed the corporate ladder for the last 20 years and has a breadth of knowledge to share with other people of color looking for insight into career development and execs wanting to navigate best DEI practices. Calvin, thank you for being with us today.
I appreciate the invite. This is going to be a great topic.
Yeah, so to start off, in your role as a leader doing DEI work in your own company, we'd love to hear how you identify and relate to the concept of being a catalyst.
Well, I'll start off personally, and personally, I'm not sure if your audience can see me, but I have a bit of tint to my skin, have quite a bit of melanin, and anytime inclusion is involved in any case, it's better for me, it's better for my friends, my family. I have two nieces who are young in college right now, and you have to push to be intentional about improvement, and that's one of those things where I make sure that if the world is better by the time they get to my age, I did my job. And strategically, I've been the lead on many teams. And one of the things that I've learned by sometimes accidental, sometimes purposeful circumstances is that having a diverse team is the best way to go forward strategically with anything you're going to do, whether it be a marketing campaign, whether it be a new feature in your platform, whether it be a new way to do customer service. Having a bunch of different ways, a bunch of different thinkers thinking in different ways can only be a benefit when you're trying to plan something.
I love that so much. Like, it just makes business sense. It makes business sense in addition to all of the other reasons that we should do it. And I love the idea of leaving the world a better place for those loved ones around you. So we'd love to start off by having you tell us like 1 to 2 skills that have made you successful, as a leader, and maybe some stories of how they've helped you along the way, or sometimes when they've failed because you didn't have them.
I guess I'll start with the failures first. Like I said, like I mentioned previously, you have to be intentional. And sometimes being intentional can be a bit of a double-edged sword, where I would see an interview or see a candidate, and the first thing I'd see is the demographic I was chasing. And what that did was that led me to build a team that sometimes didn't have the experience I was looking for. And what I ended up doing is I had to change my perspective, right? My perspective had to fail from me trying too hard, for lack of a better way to put it. And the skill that I implemented is less of a skill and more of a process, was to establish a process that can be a gateway to diversity rather than chase it explicitly. One of the things that can be tricky is when you're leading a team is ultimately the team's success and productivity is up to you. And if you pick a team that looks the way you'd like it to look, but doesn't necessarily have the capabilities to handle the things you needed to handle, it's going to be a net fail for you and them, versus having a process. And that as an example, whenever I put a job listing out, and you get all the applications flooding in. I actually try my best to ignore the person's name. I try my best to ignore their college, like if they have any university work, their name, right? What I try to look at is I look at the idea of the person using the resume to present who they are. I look at core competencies, right? What is their stylistic idea of how to present themselves, right? Do they have the proper syntax of everything? Do they have a good sense of style? Do they have a bunch of typos? Are there a bunch of misspelled words? Is there are they using a font that looks like it was drawn by crayon, right? Like, you use the resume as a way to inform yourself on the core competencies of the person. And then, right, that's the first step. And then after that, you can start to dive into who they are. But first, and this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, you need to remove the person as a first step. And then after that first step is done, you're like, okay, they have all the idea of the core competencies I'm looking for. Then you move to the next step of trying to identify if they're going to work with your team. The number two thing is letting your culture be the decision maker on who you choose, right? If you have a good culture with a good group of people, what will happen is naturally that person that you decided to choose is going to fit, or they're not, right? Make sure to involve your team members in interviews. For me personally, I try to make sure that every person that we decide to do an interview with, they speak to at least two members of my team. They speak to me first, two members of my team, and then another executive within our company as well, to make sure that not only their core competency fit, but they're also a culture fit. On my team itself, we have former actors, we have stay-at-home moms, we have aspiring musicians. They're still doing their job here. You still trust them to do their job here, but they're not just one thing or one person. And if somebody is able to navigate all those types of personalities and all those types of backgrounds, just in terms of speaking back and forth, they're going to be a good fit. And that's what's led to kind of the demographic that I have now. We're majority female oriented, majority people of color. Like I said, we have some people, I have no idea if they have a college degree or not. I just know they're very good at their job. It's not something I tend to care about, right? But that's essentially it. You start with removing the person and then start letting your culture be the guide if they're actually going to fit. And from there, that's led me to a point where I have a pretty awesome, amazing team to work with.
There is so much richness to unpack there. So first of all, you're the first person to say this, and I freaking love it. I love the intentionality as a double-edged sword. It's super spot on. And I'm curious, so when I was in my last corporate role, I had this massive spreadsheet of all of the different types of diversity that I was introvert, extrovert, like all these different types. And it did really slow down the process, and I'm not sure that I got the outcomes that I wanted. So it's just like the interest, did I slow it down too much? There's a lot about how my deliberateness and intentionality might not have been the most effective thing. But I have a question for you about when you get to the resumes. I totally agree with taking the name off and the college off, but you said you're like looking for the core competencies. And there's a question that I have there about like even equity versus justice, because it's like if before they get to you, they haven't had equal opportunities to develop those core competencies. How do you account for that and as you're looking at the things that are standing out on the resume? And should you, I guess?
Well, and this one is something that I've thought about a lot, and it's not going to be something that a lot of HR people like to admit about the background of how things work. Say, for example, I was on TikTok once, and on TikTok, there's a ton of people who tell you, hey, just add this onto your resume. Hey, add this onto your resume. Hey, add this on your resume. That in itself is a core competency. Knowing, hey, I don't have what they might be looking for, but I can build something what they're looking for, right? There's many different ways that somebody can present what they did when they were younger, right? I don't disregard someone's experience just because they are younger, right? Everybody has some sort of experience that can apply to something else. And in the case of like I said, what I'm looking for is, how do you fill the space, right? Not that the space is filled, how do you fill it? To me, that shows effort.
Yeah, creative
And
thinking,
again,
problem solving. Yeah, that's a
exactly.
really smart answer to that. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Finish your thought.
Oh no, like, and so there's more than one way to just read it. That's why I say, like you're trying to find somebody who is well-rounded. You're trying to find somebody who can fit, and it's interesting with this. I don't like getting into generational kind of back and forth and the wars that tend to happen online, but basically what happens with this, I think I'm Gen Z or X. I'm an 80s baby. That's all I know. But basically, the ones who were kind of born in the internet age, a lot of times they have access to information to be able to, like I said, be able to fill that out. So for me, it's okay. If you submitted, you had one job, right? One job ever. And you submit a resume to me with just your one job and 3 lines. What does that communicate? That communicates to me that, number one, effort, right? Number 2, resources. You have these magical machines that connect everywhere. Hey, everybody has AI now, right? How can you present you when you have one job to present to me to show, okay, I can actually do this? And for me, one of the core competencies for what I look for is the ability to communicate, the ability to use your resources you have on hand. And that's where you can convey that to me or just any other person who's hiring, right? Specifically because my way is a little bit different than most companies that happen out there, because they have the HR scripts, right, that scan the resume looking for the buzzwords, or they talk to the hiring manager and there's an adherence to a very, very strict guideline, right, of what they're looking for. And my way can be a bit more labor intensive for somebody who's an executive, but it can lead you down to what you said, like a positive outcome, which is an amazing team that's also a diverse team. It's covering the 2 boxes at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's great advice for both the person hiring and for the people who are listening who are applying for jobs. Like, use your skills, use your resources. Justin, I know you had a follow-up.
Yeah. So I'm curious too, you talked about in the second skill about that, culture becomes the way you kind of derive fit. We often talk about, as you probably no doubt know, like the culture is usually based around maybe dominant culture, right? And so when you talk about building diverse teams, the diverse teams get hired and then they don't necessarily feel like they fit in the dominant culture of the organization. And so then there's usually, they don't stay very long. So what kinds of, if you could tell other leaders, like what kind of cultural norms or principles or values do you kind of instill in your company so that you can kind of retain the diverse team and folks feel like they belong there?
Well, so the answer is a bit of a 2-parter because there is maintaining a culture, right? So right now I'm at the maintain culture phase, and that helps to be able to, like I said, be able to use the culture to funnel who we'd like in the perfect fit. Initially I had to build that culture, and a lot of the times it's just taking risks, and there is no simple way about it. One of the kind of cheat codes I had early in my career when we were building the company was I would go through a staffing agency, and going through the staffing agency helped save the initial labor time, but also it got me a chance to be able to talk to a lot of people in person, back when in-person interviews were a thing, and be able to get a sense of who they were as a person. And usually what would happen in the most case, like I said, like I have a former actor. He was looking for kind of her first job into the tech, and I was like, okay, let's give it a shot, right? For me, that's kind of the starting point. It's when you're fighting against that dominant culture, you're going to have to take risks more than often to get to where you like to be, right? And that's not just with building a team, that was with me too. The CEO hates when I tell the story, but I was actually laid off by Regpack. So I have a framed letter where I was laid off 3 months after I was hired. Now I'm a partner. And the reason why I picked this company to begin with was I don't know anybody in tech that can get me the gig that I'm looking for. Okay, I need to take a risk. And what I did was apply for startups. Anyone that would give me any way in, and from there I was just going to grind my way as high as I could do it. Back then, if you would have told me, I'd still be at it a decade later, in my head, when you're younger, you think you're going to be a millionaire like 4 years after, I'd be like Elon, driving a private jet. But basically, you just have to take risks on both sides of it, honestly. There's no way, like, the story of David and Goliath. David won because he took a risk, right? You're always going to battle against the large wave, against the dominant culture. That's a fight that's never going to go away. You just need to be okay with taking a chance, understanding that chance might fail, but that doesn't mean you give up, right? It's all about endurance. It's all about perseverance. It's always about keep trying.
So as you kind of name that, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing right now as a Catalyst leader in this space?
The biggest challenge is that technically our company is still a small company, right? We're still less than 50 people. I'd love for my company to be Google size so I can kind of changes on a wide scale. At some point, somebody at a large company will do it, and that will be the one domino that kind of causes everything to fall after it. But that's honestly my biggest challenge. It's I can only do so much with the reach that I have. Part of the reason I was juiced to come on this podcast and talk about it, right? Maybe we can find common ground with other people who are listening. Maybe I can find tactics from them as well. But basically, that's kind of the biggest thing right now, right? Like we're climbing, we're multinational, multi-millions per year as a business, and hopefully we get to multi-billions, and then from there I could really take some wide swings with how I'd like to make some changes.
I think it's amazing hearing the size of the company and your commitment, and it sounds like the organization's commitment to creating a truly diverse org is extra impressive, because if you're that size company, everyone is working full cylinder all the time, and the pressure to make decisions fast and that level, the balance of intentionality is just super interesting, Calvin. So I absolutely love that. All right, we're ready to shift to the fun part. You ready for the rapid fire?
I'm always down for fun. I was waiting for the rapid fire.
Good answer. All right. What would you tell people? What is the one thing that you do to prepare for a big meeting?
This may sound simple, but I eat.
No one has said that before. That's brilliant.
No one wants me to be hangry on a meeting, and I imagine I am not the only person who can get hangry very quickly. So it's not just eating to prevent hanger, but it's also to do a bit of a mental palate cleanser, right? You take 5-10 minutes, go get a sandwich really quickly, go get a cup of water, reset everything that's been happening in your, like right before this call, I was on 4 other calls talking about all sorts of things. And then I sat down and had a sandwich and had a drink of water really quick, and it reset everything, make sure I was focused on this. And that nothing gets lost, and I'm focused on all the questions, and it's a simple one, but I think it's very important to make sure you got time to eat and also time to kind of reset.
It's like starting with the foundations. You are your body and your ability to show up and be clear. Like you start with the physical layer. I love it. All right. Do you get free days, and what's one of your favorite things to do on a free day?
I will try to include as much context as possible in this. So my favorite way to spend a free day is to get lost on purpose. So back when we first started, it was the first few years, I was working like 13 out of 14 days. And on the days I got off, I didn't have a lot of money in the bank. And so the one thing I knew I could afford was 1 tank of gas. And I started playing this game with myself called Pick a Direction. And so I'd start in the Bay Area and I'd pick north, south, east, or west, just randomly how I felt. And then I would just drive and make random choices on which freeway I end up, which stops I would take, up until half a tank of gas. And then I'd see where I was, walk around, hang around, interact with some locals, and then I'd drive right back. That led to me coming up with all sorts of other clever games, like chasing a sunset. So I would have a game where I started playing, I want to say 7 years ago, where I'd try to find the best picture of a sunset I could take with my cell phone. My magnum opus I took in like 2021. I don't think I'm ever going to beat that one.
Can we share that? Is it online? Can we share it somewhere?
Sure. I could send you the version that I like that I don't think I'll put online. So I'll send that to you.
Yeah, if you put it, we can put a link in the show notes. That'd be super fun.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I do. The chasing sunsets turned into chasing foods. So like, I've done a road trip to Portland just to try biscuits before. I've done a road trip to LA to try pizza. I've done a road trip to New York to try pasta. It just kind of, it started as getting lost on purpose, and then it turned into just kind of whenever I get a free day, I'm going to go find something new to get into.
Okay, I really want to go with you. Do you have people who go with you? Like, do you have co-pilots who sometimes join your adventures?
Okay, so that is the thing that I get from my friends all the time, where I don't really invite a ton of people. I think maybe 1 or 2 of my friends have gone, and maybe an X or 2 of mine have gone, but usually it's kind of fairly spontaneous, where I'm just like, yeah, I need to get out of here. I just go jump in the car, and next thing you know, I'm 4 hours away and in the middle of nowhere, I don't know, hopefully eating tacos near a beach somewhere.
All right, brilliant. I'm totally stealing that. All right, who's your favorite famous catalyst, alive or dead, and why?
Okay, so this one might get vetoed by you and Justin, because it's not a person. It is, here, I'll just say it, and I'll give context too, and you can say that's not an answer you can do, and I'll pick a person. It's PBS, the television network, because the first time I've ever seen a man cook. So in my community, in my family, men didn't cook, men barbecued. That was different. If I went anywhere near the kitchen, stuff was going to get thrown at me because I was only in there to either try biscuits or get somebody away. So men stayed out of the kitchen. So the first show I ever saw where a man cooking was Yan Can Cook. It was Martin Yan on PBS. The first show that I learned about biology, right? There's a generation who was the Bill Nye generation. My generation was Miss Frizzle. I had the Magic School Bus. Again, PBS. And of course, there's Reading Rainbow, of which, like, I feel like people who weren't even alive when Reading Rainbow was on know the theme song to Reading Rainbow. Again, PBS. And it made me think of, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, right? All the things that PBS has put on TV back when it wasn't really a popular decision, right? This is 70s and 80s, right? Mr. Rogers. I believe he had the first Black person on a TV show before, or on that type of TV show before. Miss Frizzle, again, she was basically my first STEM teacher. Reading Rainbow, right? That was, you sit down and he'd start reading a book and you'd listen to the stories all day. And so I understand it's not particularly a person, but
I love it.
You and Justin will allow me this cheat.
It's awesome. I fall asleep right now every night to LeVar Burton. He's on the Calm app, and I just love his voice, and he's so great. So I love PBS.
Yeah, that one definitely counts. That definitely counts in my book.
Okay, Perfect.
Well, the reason I'll follow it up, because the reason why is because you just named like 5 or 6 catalysts in a row who are all on PBS. So I think they have a good track record of having those types of dynamic individuals. So.
Yeah, apologies to the person at PBS that made the decision to give all those TV shows. I just gave credit to the entire network, because I think they did and currently do great work. Like, I feel like I've seen a reboot for most of those shows I named, honestly.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap today's episode, is there a call to action that you have for us, Calvin?
Yes, and this one might be a little different too. I'll give a scenario and a personal story. So hopefully your audience will laugh at me. So the challenge is to look for the hidden layers, right? Don't just look at the immediate and what you can see. And the scenario is this, right? Say, because you two are consultants, like you work in corporate industries, you know kind of how it works when it comes to hiring people, right? So if you're in a healthcare industry and you put a job out for an account executive, and one of the people who applies is a construction foreman of 12 years, right? Now, in most cases, somebody who is looking for an account executive won't be able to see why a construction foreman could apply to that position. But when you look at what a construction foreman actually does, they apply perfectly. That is a puzzle piece that would fit immediately and amazingly. And honestly, they probably do a pretty fantastic job, even if they don't have previous healthcare experience, right? And for me, the personal story kind of applies in that same way. So I'll try to tell the story without giving away names of people, so they can, if they ever come across this or hear this, they can help themselves. I was on an interview. I was the person being interviewed, and I was fresh out of college. Like, I had one job out of college, and I was applying for the second job, was basically a sales job. And there was the regional director, I'll call him E, and the immediate manager, I'll call him J. And so in the interview, he asked me, why do I want the job? And my answer was, hey man, rent's due. I need a gig. If y'all are hiring, I will take a job. Now, most people who are managers, if you hear that as an answer, even if I heard that as an answer to that question, my brain would melt and I'd be like, okay, you might need to leave because you might not be clever enough to be here. But for whatever E saw in me, or whatever Jay has joked about this after the fact, after I got hired, because I did get the job. He said that he was writing notes to E saying, is this dude like nuts? Like, why is he answering these questions? And E would always wave him off. Now, for me, the lesson in that, and the part that I'm always trying to get to, is I'm always trying to understand what he saw, the level of what he saw. He saw something in the way that I spoke. He saw something in the way that I presented my resume. He saw something that I can't personally see right now, even thinking about the interview, that he was like, this person is going to be amazing at this job. And I ended up being pretty good at the job. And so try to be the E, right? Try to be the person that looks at the applicant. And like you said, like you brought up the idea of lack of experience earlier with the resumes. And it was, right, it doesn't mean that, like, lack of experience doesn't mean they can't do the job. You need to look at what they're capable of. You need to look at their potential. You need to be able to gauge all the layers of who they are and use that as the way to decide whether or not somebody can do it. Don't just let somebody saying, well, rent's due, be the reason you don't hire them, because they might very well be pretty good at the job. So look for the second layers. Try to be the E is probably the call to action, I would say. It takes a little bit more work. It takes a little bit more patience, but ultimately you can always end up with a gem in the end.
Yeah, thank you, Calvin, for that. And so thank you for being on the show as well. We're excited to continue to watch your work. at Regpack, and appreciate you coming on and giving us a bit more context about what it is you're doing and how you do it and how you have managed to create these diverse teams that are working well together.
Of course. Thank you too for having me. This has been pretty great.
It's been awesome, super energizing. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, of course, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com.
And make sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, and Burn Out. If you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send a link their way.